Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me and for what I assume was a very nice introduction. I didn't have the translation on, so I have no idea. Good afternoon, everybody. How's everyone feeling? All right, one person's doing really well. I'm speaking to that one person. Great, so you're with me for the next 30 minutes or so, and we are going to talk a little bit about algorithms. So don't worry, it's not going to be too overly technical. It's just kind of understanding the role that algorithms are playing in all of the different things that we've been talking about over the last 2 days. So as mentioned, I'm Kelsey Bjornsgaard. I'm the Director of Learning and Development at the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, which is a counter-extremism organization that is based in London, as well as Berlin and DC, that focuses on all of the different forms and manifestations of hate, extremism, and polarization globally. So we do a lot of background with research, but also through application. So I'm going to be drawing quite a lot from that research today, but obviously from that you can tell I'm going to be focusing a lot more on what the consequences and risks are for young people with regard to radicalization, hate, extremism, and polarization. So today we're going to, first of all, just talk about a little bit about what algorithms are, what they do, how they serve us, so all of the good things they're doing for us online, and also all of the risks that they are presenting. Then, of course, looking specifically on the impacts that they're having on young people, and then moving on to some solutions. So just to start out with, is everybody familiar with the term algorithm? One person has heard it. 2 people have heard it before. Has everyone heard the term algorithm before? Yes. Great. Love it. All right, so just very simply, it is a set of computational rules that makes decision about data. So you can think about what a recipe does for you while you're cooking, an algorithm does for a computer. It tells it what information to take, what steps to take with that information in order to reach some sort of outcome. But instead of a cake, it's your, For You feed. Now, for online platforms, because algorithms exist sort of in all sorts of things, but for online platforms specifically, these rules automate the selection and curation of content. So that also includes the communities, the creators, the accounts, anything that you see, encounter, or deal with online is usually passing through an algorithm of some kind. Now, there's a ton of different algorithms that do a lot of different things, but there's 4 types of algorithms that are going to be most relevant for us in the context of this conversation. So the first is the recommendation algorithm. So this is the algorithm that decides what you see when you are on a social media platform. So obviously, you're being fed first and foremost videos and content from the accounts that you follow, but of course, the algorithm is also recommending new things for you. New accounts to follow, it puts new videos in your feed, it puts new photos in your feed, it suggests different topics and themes that you might be interested in, and this is all fed through the recommendation algorithm. And this is probably the algorithm that we are most concerned with, because it is the one that is most responsible for keeping young people on social media platforms consuming as much content as possible for as long as possible. If you have any doubt about how important the recommendation algorithm is, for anyone who was following all of the drama in the United States around the sale of TikTok, what buyers were interested in was their algorithm. More than anything else, they wanted the algorithm. And what TikTok will never tell you about is their algorithm. It is the most closely guarded secret of any social media platform, is how that recommendation algorithm works. And it's for good reason, because it's the reason those platforms are successful, and it's the reason why kids are spending 5 and 6 hours a day on those platforms. Also importantly, though, is the search algorithm. Anytime you open Google, you type something in, you're not just getting objectively correct answers or links to things that will help you. It's giving you results that it thinks you want to see personally. So if something happens in the world, you put that into Google, you want to get some news, it's going to feed you news that it thinks that you will agree with. If you put in restaurant recommendations, even if you're just looking for restaurants in the city, it's going to choose ones that it thinks that you will like based on restaurants you've rated in the past or what you've looked for in the past. It's kind of a fun experiment to sit down next to someone else, open Google, put the exact same search thing in, and see how different the results are. Because they will be different, because the algorithm is showing you what it thinks you most want to see, which in some cases is really nice. You know, you get that Mexican restaurant you were looking for. But if you're looking for different points of view on what's happening in the world, not great. Advertising algorithms, they show you ads, but it shows you the ads that it thinks you're going to buy, what it thinks you want to purchase and will be interested in. And then, of course, so all of these three algorithms, these are responsible for what we call the personalized web. So everybody's experience on the internet is different. I have a different experience, you have a different experience, your neighbor has a different experience, your spouse has a different experience, all based on what you do online. So the things that you watch, the things you like, the content that you follow, the creators you follow, the things you've Googled in the past. So these social media platforms are both drawing from their own data on you, but also data that has been purchased, advertising in particular. But in addition to these three personalization algorithms, there's also content moderation. So content moderation is only possible through algorithms. It is scanning all of the content that comes through, is posted on a platform, looking for things that either violate the rules of the platform or are illegal. So that means that the rules set in that algorithm, they're tuned based on that platform's regulations. So that might be different from one platform to the next. And what that algorithm does is it either blocks the content altogether, you can't see it, you can't upload it, it's gone, or it downgrades it. So it might be that you've posted it, but the algorithm's going to, nah, this gets a low score. Either people aren't going to be interested in this, or I think it's problematic, and it will just fall down the list. It means that it's less likely to show up in recommendations, less likely to show up on your For You page, your home page. It's just been downvoted. And a really interesting byproduct of that is we have what we call algo speak. So because the algorithms are designed to downgrade certain words, you have workarounds. So has anybody heard, especially someone, probably Gen Z, say unalive? Yeah, so instead of killed, they say unalive. Well, that's because algorithms will downgrade the word killed, especially in reference to suicide. So this means even if you're doing a suicide prevention video, the word suicide, the word killed, gets downgraded in the algorithm. Anyone who's ever done any sort of communication campaigning that is supposed to counter something bad gets caught up in the exact same algorithm as the people who are posting the bad thing you're trying to counter. But this also applies to just kids that are trying to use it. So that means they're substituting in words, they're using emoticons, and over time, that is coming into the lexicon, it's coming offline, and obviously every generation has their own slang. That's not new. But what's happening is the slang is evolving and changing much, much faster, because somebody will come in, they'll say, oh, unalive, and that works for a couple of weeks. The algorithm's adjusted, that doesn't work anymore. They choose a new word, that works for a couple weeks, you get the idea. So it means that language and slang are changing much, much faster in reaction to algorithms. It's that term algo speak. That's neither good nor bad, it's just, I thought it was interesting. And if you're teachers and you're wondering why the slang seems to be different every 2 weeks, it's one more thing to blame on social media. Now, obviously, content moderation algorithms are supposed to be making the internet a safer place. And in a lot of ways, they absolutely have. There's a lot of things that the content moderation algorithms have gotten right, and there's a lot of things that they've gotten much better. But obviously, they're not working exactly as we'd like them to, or I wouldn't be standing up here right now. Now, the challenge that we find with content moderation algorithms is twofold. The first one is technological, and on that one, we've made a huge amount of progress. The second is greed, and we haven't made any progress there. And the second is really why these content moderation algorithms will probably never work the way we want them to. Because the content they restrict is content that would often be more engaging. And if they're going to choose between engagement and money, and making the platform a little bit safer and a little more enjoyable, you know which one they're probably choosing and are going to continue choosing. So that's just a quick overview of what all of the different sorts of algorithms, well, not all, but the 4 that we really want to think about. Now, just very quickly before we move on, I just really want to emphasize, because at this point, algorithm has kind of become a dirty word. It's a very easy thing to blame. But it's really important to kind of keep in mind 2 different things. Firstly, the internet would be basically unusable if it weren't for algorithms. The internet is a vastly populated place. Take a moment to think about how much content do you think is on the internet? People, places, websites, videos, how much content do you think is there? Now, whatever you just thought of, multiply that by 100. And then take that and multiply that by 1,000, and you're probably not even close. The internet is huge, and it's only workable, it's only searchable, navigable because of algorithms. So we need them. And the second thing to remember is that all of the issues that we are concerned about predate algorithms. They predate the internet, but these things have been online from the beginning. I've heard several mentions in the last couple days of eating disorder content. Eating disorder content was a huge problem on the internet from the beginning. Way before we automated everything, way before we turned control over to the internet, there were forums, there was content, there was eating disorder content. So just keep those 2 things in mind as we go forward, because it's just important to remember that algorithms didn't start this problem, and they're not going away. All right, so before we get into all the things we're concerned about, it's good to remember that the algorithms actually make our lives and young people's lives on the internet better in a lot of ways. So the algorithm is what makes it possible for young people to find content and knowledge that enriches their lives. So if you have a student who's interested in science, they watch a video on biology, they might be recommended videos on chemistry, on physics, on space travel. It's an opportunity for them to discover and unlock new information that is interesting for them and can shape their learning journeys. It is a literal lifesaver for young people who are marginalized or isolated or have nobody in their lives who look like them, who feel like them, who can support them in who they are. There's been a lot of research that's been done, especially with LGBTQ teens, who have no support system at home, for whom being able to find peers online literally saved their lives. It gave them a community and people to connect with, to better understand themselves, and to grow up in a place of love when they couldn't find that at home. Algorithms make it possible for young people to find those communities. It amplifies positive social opportunities, so it can be an integral part of a young person's civic development. They can find opportunities to get involved in their communities, to join protests, positive protests. There's a lot of ways for young people to find people who share the same concerns about issues that they do, and then take opportunities to act. And with personalized learning, obviously, I mentioned just their journey on social media, which is a form of sort of informal learning. But algorithms are also being incorporated into more formal, intentional learning to really make more personalized learning journeys for young people possible. Then, as I said, it does filter out a huge amount of harmful content, even if it's not all of it. But of course, I wouldn't be here, and we wouldn't be talking about this if algorithms only made young people's lives better. Because they are absolutely, like many tools, a double-edged sword. So in taking that vast, huge internet and narrowing it down into that little sliver that just suits you, you're filtering out a lot of things, and it's a lot of things that you might disagree with. It's opinions that you don't share. It's content with people that you don't think, have anything to say, which means that we end up filtered into filter bubbles and echo chambers. This is an issue of the wider personalized web. This isn't just a social media problem, but we see it a lot on social media. And when we all live in echo chambers and we all live in filter bubbles, we lose that shared connection and that shared concept of society and of truth. There's a lot of consequences that come when you have this filtered society. And it starts at a really young age. It negatively impacts mental health. Now, this has been spoken to a lot over the last 2 days, but I will just point to the sort of specific role that algorithms play in that they are designed to keep young people on the platform for as long as possible. And we know that the length spent on social media does have an impact on mental health, on sleep, on depression, on anxiety. But also, as one of the panelists mentioned today, it's just the sheer number of times you see something. So even if it's innocuous content, say you see a beauty video, one beauty video, fine. 2 beauty videos, okay. But if you see 40 of them in a compressed amount of time, that can start having serious impacts, especially on a young woman's self-image and mental health. And then, of course, just the longer you spend online, you're more likely, quite a few studies have been done on this, you're much more likely to encounter harmful and questionable content, which then again, the algorithm is also responsible for feeding them. And through this, it's introducing radical ideas. So there's the term, the rabbit hole. You go down the rabbit hole. You start on one thing, you view one thing, and then you blink, 4 hours have passed, and you've gotten somewhere else. It has teleported you from something that started out innocent and innocuous to something a little bit more extreme. And this is how young men, for example, end up starting out by looking at videos of weightlifting or self-improvement and end up at Andrew Tate in the manosphere. That manosphere is the dark corner of the internet where men really, really hate women, which is the understatement of anything I'll say today. But that's how that happens. You start on something innocuous, you start on something ironic or on something that's funny, and then you just get fed the next idea and the next idea and the next idea. And if they get slightly more extreme each time and more radical each time, you're being fed these sort of radical ideas in a slow drip that you don't even know that you've gotten from A to Z. And then through this repetition, it's normalizing extreme ideas, it's normalizing violence. You end up with these dark corners of the internet where you have serial killer ideation, school shooter ideation, and where you have these really dark, violent ideas that have just become normal. Now, of course, the majority of the time, these things stay online. But there are some really serious consequences that can happen. So we've seen extremist groups, terrorist organizations, they've gotten really good at utilizing these algorithms to spread very targeted propaganda. So it used to be you had to do a lot of work to bring people to your ideas. You had to bring people to you. The algorithm does that work for them. So the way that extremist organizations are able to recruit, they've gotten a huge benefit and a huge boost from algorithms. And just to emphasize, though, most of this does not end in violence. The majority of people who adopt extreme ideas, even who join extremist organizations, will not necessarily commit a violent act. But you still have a large number, not a majority, but I don't want to overblow this. This isn't most young people, but you do still have a worrying number of people, of young people, who are being exposed to extreme ideas, to radical ideas, to terrorist ideas in communities that reinforce them. But sometimes it does turn to violence. So there is enough of this content online, and there's enough capacity to rabbit hole your way through it, that you also see what they sometimes call self-radicalization, where people are you don't even need interaction with other people. It's just you watch the content, you take inspiration, you take it in. And one such example of this is in 2019 was the Christchurch shooting in New Zealand. So a 28-year-old man conducted mass shootings at 2 different mosques, killing 51 people. Now 28, young but not that young. However, he was very, as the kids say, very online, and from a very young age. From the age of 14, he was spending time on Reddit, on 4chan, on 8chan, and on YouTube, consuming far-right content. And they know that he financially supported several violent far-right creators on YouTube. And YouTube is probably the platform where the most research has been done into algorithmic-driven rabbit holes that take you to extreme content. So this is an example of where a very young man, alone on his computer, managed to find his way into places where he gained, and obviously there's a lot of other factors. But we know that he had access to this content and he acted on it at a much later stage in his life. And then there's also a growing concern about violent online communities. Now, most of these you've probably not heard of, and you probably don't need to, but there is something called the COM network, and within that you have 764. So the COM network is a group of accelerationists, of communities, essentially. You have 764, which has gained a lot more attention in the US, especially because more and more victims have come forward, but is a child sexploitation cult that has victims and members as young as 13. And then you have the Order of Nine Angels, which has come into more prominence as of last month because the Minneapolis mass shooter in the United States, who again was also 23, was a member of the Order of Nine Angels. So these are often nihilistic, they're accelerationists, some of them are far right, but these are spaces where young people are drawn in, they're groomed, and they are made to commit acts of violence. These are places where violence is not encouraged, it's required as part of membership. This is a tiny, 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 tiny subsect of the internet, but they are targeting incredibly young people, and it is a global phenomenon. So this is a whistle-stop tour of all the dark places that algorithms can take you on the internet. But of course, a lot of these are taking place off social media channels. And actually, a lot of it's well beyond, a lot of it's happening in Discord, a lot of it's happening in gaming platforms, a lot of this has nothing to do with social media or with algorithms. And actually, a lot of these violent online communities, a lot of the grooming that's taking place is not on social media, it's on Discord, it's on Telegram. So that's another thing. But those algorithms lead them to the ideas and to the content. All right, so as we're moving into solutions, I just want everyone to kind of keep in mind where all of this is coming from, because obviously all of these things are terrible. All of it's terrible. But it is still a fairly small subsect. It's a very small number of people who are radicalized online and eventually commit violence. Most of it is just edgelord shit posting memes. And excuse my language, but that is actually the technical term for it, is shitposting. And they believe in nothing, they do nothing, and most of them stay that way, or they grow out of it, or whatever it is. And now time will tell what the long and medium-term consequences are of spending that much time in hateful and nihilistic spaces. It's probably not good. But it's good to keep in mind that it's not only the online spaces that we need to worry about. These issues existed before social media. These issues existed before the internet. The school shooter that the young people were idolizing, Columbine, that predates any of this. So it's just good to kind of keep in mind that social media may be exacerbating these things. Algorithms make it easier for young people to find this content. It is making the scale of the problem larger. It is not the problem. And I say that as we go into the solutions, because I just want to really emphasize that if we are going to address this well, and if we're going to really get prevention right, we need to take a holistic look at this. We need to seek out holistic solutions. Because it's not just the fact that young people are finding the content, it's that someone's making it. It's that someone's connecting with it. It's that it speaks to them, that it inspires them, that for some reason it resonates in their life, and they are taking actions based on it. Why are young people connecting with this content? And that is something we need to keep in mind as well. There's a huge amount of work that we can do on fixing the algorithms and making social media a little bit safer, but it's not the solution. Anyway, onto the solutions. Obviously, there's a lot that can be done in policy and regulation. I won't talk about that. There's an excellent presentation on that yesterday. Platform accountability and adjustments, as I said, those algorithms can be made better. I don't think that banning social media for kids is the answer. There's no probably time to get into that, but there's a huge number of adjustments that can be made. But what's going to matter most and make the biggest difference is education in digital literacy right from the beginning, and making sure that that is integrated into both formal and informal education, and that it is accessible to kids who do well in school, kids who don't do well in school. It's accessible to kids where they are, and it's taught in a way that makes sense for them. We also need to look at community programming. We need to look at support for individuals and for families. There has to be something done at the community level, at the individual level, at the family level, to address what the underlying issues are that are making kids vulnerable to this content to begin with. Because it's not only the content, there are other underlying factors that need to be addressed. So all that to say, we need to take a really holistic approach to this that's policy, that's technical, that is community, that's education, that's individual. If we don't do all of those things in tandem, then it's not going to work. And then just to end very quickly, because that is my time, this is an example of a digital citizenship program that we did at ISD. So we did it in partnership with YouTube. So it was using informal education, so it was done in community centers, but it was done with YouTube influencers. So we brought in local YouTube influencers from around London to actually lead the sessions, because it got the kids a lot more interested in it, as to partnering with YouTube. But it went over all of the different types, all the different issues of digital citizenship, but all of it was grounded in culture and cultural references, again, to make it a little bit more accessible. And we ran this program for a number of years. It was externally evaluated, very successful. Happy to talk about this any further, but it's just to show that the type of education that can be done, some of the best education in digital literacy and citizenship is actually done outside of the school. And it's really important to use the language and the sort of the things that are relevant for youth in conducting that kind of education. And that's me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.